that more scoring is better than less scoring. We won a lot of games, and we had a decade of dominance there in the 70s that a game might be a 14-10 game. Now they 38-33 coming down to the end, and somebody rushes for 150 yards, and the receiver may get 200 yards. Those things didn't really happen back in the 70s.
Right.
So let me ask you this, Sue. Since that didn't happen back in the 70s, do you enjoy watching the game more now compared to back in the day?
Well, I like it. It's a bigger, stronger, faster, more talented guys now, and I think different strategies. You always, being an ex, I was in your business for about 17 years doing the Viking games on the radio network, and you see a lot of guys come and go. That's the fun. I saw Chris Carter and Anthony Carter and all these guys have revolutionized the game here, and bleed purple still, so it's still fun going to every game. And the NFL alumni and the Viking alumni is very strong in this area, so it's all good. And I wish, after the 13 or 4 year, a couple years ago, last year a little step backwards, but you understand that those are what happens. I think you're on your way to the Super Bowl until you're not.
Yeah. How closely do you follow the team still to this day? Like you just said it the last 2 years. You just said how they did. What are you looking forward to the most this year, and how closely are you paying attention to this team this year, and what do you expect out of them this year?
Well, I'm a loyal season ticket holder for years since I retired, and usually I farm those out to the wife and grandkids and whoever. But I still enjoy going to the games. The stadium's great. The atmosphere, it's I don't know if you ever got to the old Met Stadium, but it wasn't quite as plush as, guys came. We had a ball, but there wasn't many good seats in that place. It was a baseball configured stadium, but we loved it. Had a great winning percentage there, but it's such a good game now, and there's so many great personalities, and I think through the media these personalities come out. So in the old days with Bud Grant, who was a wonderful coach and a wonderful leader, but it was kind of stay in your lane, don't get too out of beyond your skis, don't dress too flamboyantly or talk too flamboyant. If you happen lucky enough to score a touchdown, give the ball back to the official. There's no gritty dances.
I was about to say.
I think the saying was act like you've been there before and you'll be there again. And he towed a pretty good line. And we had I think the thrill of my career was playing with some of the greatest players in football history. The Jim Marshalls, and roomed with Fran Tarkington, and Chuck Foreman for his career was. I always tell people Chuck Foreman was probably the best running back in football the 3-4 years. That 73 came in, and it's not a coincidence. After he came in, went to the Super Bowl in 73 and 74 and 76 because we had a Chuck Foreman. So a lot of good players, of course, in the Purple People Eaters. I tell Carl Eller and Jim Marshall I probably would have been a little over 6'2" if I didn't have to practice against those guys every practice. And you practice, boy.
They were sending your growth.
Oh, yeah. Well, the interesting thing there was the kind of unwritten rule was, and you practice hard, but if Jim Marshall or Carl Eller would say brother-in-law, that meant just kind of lean into each other. Don't let's not make this a real brawl here. And after a hot practice, boy, that comes in handy. I go, yes, sir, let's do that, because it was challenging environment. I think I was telling Tracy that Tracy McDonald, our great alumni legends leader, that early in the training camp, the per diem was $50 a week. That's what and you weren't guaranteed. There was no guaranteed contracts back there. So you fought like crazy. Mankato was old Gage Hall, which I think they demolished already. It's getting so old. But those were tight. A lot of fans come out then, but it was the football. Obviously, the difference now. The amount of money is not. There's not just 1 0 behind it. There's like 3 zeros.
Yeah, I think you said $50 per diem back in the week. I think they get like $2,000 a week now.
Yeah, that would be one guy's beer tab after going down to the stadium bar or the Metlers or whatever is still standing there in Mankato.
Well, Sue, I want to ask you, we've talked a lot about this game transforming and the players getting bigger, faster, stronger, but what's something about your training camp days that still lingers on in your memory that you smile whenever you get a chance to reflect on it?
Well, I reflect on the camaraderie of the guys. The saying was I came after the 69 Super Bowl, but was 40 for 60 and 70, and everybody played their role. There was we had great stars, but none of the great stars acted like prima donnas. The coach certainly was not a prima donna. He was never a man of too many words, but when he talked, you listened. And the other thing was I played with the same offense coordinator, Jerry Burns, for all 11 years, and John Michaels was my line coach for 11 years. When you win, the consistency is there, and you can't back off or slough off. You still got to practice hard every day, but they know that what they've seen in you. If you play hard, but it was very, very important. Don't make mistakes.
Right.
Show up 15 minutes early. They always talk about in Green Bay, Lombardi time, 15 minutes before a meeting. That was a Bud Grant time too. You didn't screw around with Bud Grant, and if you did, you didn't do it more than once.
No doubt about it. I have no doubt about it. You mentioned Mankato, and we talked about the Heat a little bit. When you came back year after year, because you played 11 seasons?
Yep.
When you came back, is this the time of year where you say to yourself, boy, I miss football? Or is this the time of the year where you're like, maybe I didn't miss it as much because it's freaking hot out here, and I'm like, got all these pads on?
Well, it was a dream come true. I was a 10th round draft choice, actually a running back in college, so it was a dream come true to make a team that was going places, so I was just thrilled to death. But, Mankato was interesting that I always listen to you. And then this was a day of 2-a-day practices for maybe, we were in camp like 5-6 weeks.
Right.
And you played 6 preseason games, which is crazy. Now they're down to 3, and I'm sure next year they'll go down to 2.
It's looking that way.
Eventually down to 1. But I'd always listen to, I think it was KYMN or something, radio down there, and they'd have cattle warnings. Get the, in the afternoon, get the cattle in the barn. It's way too hot. The Vikings would still practice twice a day.
Wow.
It was the hardest work you've ever done in your life. And, of course, now they have better. There was no timeout for water breaks or nothing like that. So,
5-minute breaks, yeah.
sometimes that was good and toughened you up, but sometimes, obviously, not the best idea sometimes.
Sure.
You just remind me of Ray Lewis talking about training camps back in the day and how he didn't want to go inside on the NFL Films show that I watched. Now, speaking about these guys, like you said, drastic change from what you guys had during training camp. But what do you like about this team most, whether it's the running back play, the wide receiver play, tight ends, quarterback, you name it? What excites you most for this upcoming season?
Well, I think that they're trying to develop a system that will perpetuate year in and year out. I think the head coach does a great job. They've got a staff of veteran guys that know what they're doing, so they're trying to develop. They always talk about the old culture, but you have to develop that where you can just plug in the pieces and guys fit into the system. Now, this year, I think the most interesting guy for me to watch is Aaron Jones.
Really now?
Well, now if he has the tread left on the tire, which I think he showed at the end of the year he did, he is a first-class running back. So a couple holes. Didn't have a very good run defense last year. Didn't have a very good run offense. And that has to change if you want to compete with the teams that are now. It looks like I think Green Bay just signed Love for a long contract, and they got some pretty good players. And Detroit obviously had a great year last year, so it's like, is it going to be easy? No, but I think we've got the makings of. There's some camaraderie. We settle down the quarterback situation. I think Darnold is going to be a little bit underestimated at first, and then McCarthy. What can you say about a guy that's been a winner all his career? I think it was 25-1 during his college career or something like that.
As a starter,
and he looks good. So, but you can't rush quarterbacks. It's a big jump to go from the playing in the Big Ten, which I played in. I'm not even sure if it's called the Big Ten anymore. But
it still is. Don't worry.
There's 20 teams in it probably.
18 to be exact.
Okay.
Yeah, it's about to. I'm sure it'll get to 20 at some point.
Sure.
No doubt.
We'll be. Miami will be coming up or something.
Probably.
But I think it's. You don't have to rush the quarterback. But second game or third game out of the chute, you're playing I thought the best team in football last year, the 49ers, and started the Giants, and then you play. I think who do you play? The Jets in London? Is that
Jets are in London? Yes.
Aaron Rodgers still gives you nightmares at night that if he's got anything left in the tank.
No doubt.
So it's gonna be another great year, but there's just a fine line between having a 13-4 team that everything went right and a 7-10 that everything didn't go right. So we're somewhere in there between. I'm hoping we're at the high end, but that's why you play the games.
You talked about Aaron Jones, but like we said, you played tight end in your days with the Vikings. The position is just so multifaceted now. You see a guy like T.J. Hawkinson who can really catch the ball, and then you also see a guy like Johnny Munn or Josh Oliver, guys who are a little more thick, guys who line up on the line and get out and block. In your day, though, did you have to do it all? Were you all-purpose tight end, or is it how did it work?
Well, the position has been, I never lined up more than 3 feet away from either Ron Yeri or Grady Alderman or then Steve Riley. That was it. You blocked first.
Yeah.
And then you add in, Chuck Foreman comes in 1973, probably the best back ever to come out of the backfield, caught 60, 70 passes. Add on, then Ricky Young came in, and I think in 78 or 79, he caught 90 passes. So you got to do the math. There's only one ball, so the tight end, you better block or you'll be
Right.
You'll be in the announcing booths sooner than you want to be.
That's not a bad place to be, though.
Oh,
Stu.
it's nice.
It's not
the
bad.
food's great. The money's not that great, but
Well, amen to that.
The food is great.
I can
But
attest to
the
that.
money can last a lot longer, and you can stay up there a lot longer than a playing career.
No, I made sure I got into the lunch line. Didn't have to have dinner at night. So.
Well, what's your thoughts on T.J. Hawkinson and the rest of this tight end room?
I just met him for the first time at Tommy Bahama's over here in the Mall of America. He's a great kid. I guess Iowa farm boy. Bigger than he's not a real.
He's huge. Yeah.
He's not going to be a space eater as a blocker. But same with Kyle Rudolph, who's another big guy.
Yeah, sure.
That they're put in motion there. They got different situations where they can isolate on a linebacker or, my gosh, with our wide receivers, how many guys you have to put on JJ this year? Probably 2 at least, and maybe a safety deep in the hole there, trying to make sure you don't have the quick score. But and if we can, Addison's a fine player.
He is.
Got to develop another third receiver, but I think the coach here has a pretty good offensive passing game going. So now it's just whether the quarterback. I always was, he's a Big Ten guy. Cousins was a Michigan State guy, underrated. Always. I thought underrated and probably overpaid early on in Washington. He did some good stuff with the Vikings. I mean, you
I
take
agree.
him out, he's what you call the old game manager, which he's not going to run. He's not going to probably light a fire under too many guys in the locker room, and unless he puts those chains on or something.
Kirko.
Yeah. So, but we'll miss him. Darnold, he was number 3 choice in all of football a few years back.
Yes, he was.
Has been a pretty good. Throws the ball. And I was talking to an old Viking quarterback, Bob Lee, saying, "No, I think he had made a stay in San Francisco. He was pretty good for a while. Never quite got on there, had the team or had the synergism with the other players, so he moved on. But I think he'll be the guy for the first 3-4 games, don't you think, until JJ gets in there. But he's a believer, and I think you watch him and you hear all the reports. But now you've got to evolve, and then you got to earn it on the field.
Stu, oddly enough, one Big Ten quarterback goes out the door. But get used to this. Another Big Ten quarterback steps in the door. I still can't believe it myself. USC now a member of the Big Ten. So
yeah, and that kid, Caleb
Williams, yes,
and great talent. But,
Yeah.
We'll see. And they got a great receiver. They just signed their
Roman Dute and
for
DJ Moore.
for about
yeah.
$120 million. That's that would have paid the whole
110
national debt.
million,
And
81 guarantee.
Yeah.
that would take care of the tab.
Yeah,
for sure,
so,
no doubt about it.
But he'll have to learn. I mean, we had plenty of quarterbacks. I think there's Lamarcus, the kid from LSU years ago, was the Raiders drafted.
Jamarcus Russell, yep.
Yeah, Jamarcus Russell,
and sometimes, but you have to have quarterback usually gets too much of the credit and also too much of the blame when things are going right or wrong. So
Yeah.
you need a team around him. You got to thank God we got Daraso on the weak side there blocking, and the other guy
Brian O'Neill.
With the talents there, we might
Yeah.
have a little competition going on in the middle of the line, but it's still offensive football is a consummate team game. Now, defensive football, we'd laugh. We'd have all these plays and playbooks, big thick ones, and the Viking playbook with the purple people. There's a picture of a football, and then the term "go get it," and that's it.
It's a C-ball, go get
yeah,
ball.
exactly.
Yep.
You hit it
I
on the
like
head.
that. I like
and
that.
We're on one of my great teammates, Bobby Bryant, this year is going in the Ring of Honor. Here's a guy, 175 pounds, probably broke every bone in his body, but made more big plays. And I think I told somebody on the radio that, man, he accounted for about 3 paychecks we didn't think we were getting in the playoffs. I think he blocked a kick against the Rams, and some of you guys heard I weren't even born then, but he did some great things for
Sure.
So it's the team you remember. There's no, as they say there's no I in team, and that certainly was the Vikings I played with. You had fun together, you won together, a lot of big Super Bowl losses together, but wouldn't have changed anything.
Sounds like some good memories and a lot
the
of
best.
time.
No
The
doubt about
best.
it. No doubt about it. Stu, we appreciate you taking the time to join us.
pleasure.
It was a pleasure to chit-chat with you.
Thanks for letting me
And
come in
fans,
from the
appreciate you
heat.
signing. Yeah, oh, no, please.
Do I
Anytime
have
you
to
want.
go now? Is that it?
We just got to go to the break. You can stay here as
Can I
long as
sleep
you
over
want.
there? Can I sleep over there in the
that's
corner?
Not,
Yeah,
not
you
a problem
said
for
that
me.
wherever you wanna
Not a
stay.
problem for me. Stu, thank
Tracy,
you so
get
much.
me a bucket of ice. I'll be here.
Tracy's on it right here. Okay. Stu, thank you very
Thanks,
much.
guys.
I appreciate it. When we come back on Vikings Training Camp Live, we'll talk more about what's going on with this team, especially on the defensive side of the ball. A new man is in the picture here on the defensive backfield. We'll talk about that when we come back. Welcome back into Vikings Training Camp Live, everybody. Pierre Nugent, Ahmad Hicks joining me now. And, one position that I feel like we've talked about the entire training camp. I don't know if I've ever talked about cornerbacks more in my entire career.
Yeah.
But cornerback is, again, the name of the conversation here. You had a chance to speak with one of them yesterday. And, it's a busy revolving door in that cornerback room right now.
Needless to say, because he wasn't even in that room yesterday, Pierre, but now he is. We're talking about Jay Ward. This is a guy who the Vikings drafted to play safety for them. He spent last season as a safety, one of five safeties that they kept on the roster. But in order to see the field more this season, they asked him to switch to cornerback. And I got a chance to catch up with him yesterday about that transition and what goes into making that switch. Here's what he had to say.
Just moving back and forth. Like, I did it before in previous counts. But just like knowing the playbook this year and actually knowing what the corner doing, what the safety doing, and what the people around me doing.
When they first approached you with the idea of going back to the cornerback position, what was the first thought that came through your mind?
I never minded because I already knew, like, in case of depth, since I played all three before, I'd be asked to be moved. So I don't mind it at all. I'm just trying to get on the field.
When you think about your personality, your makeup of an NFL player, do you look at yourself as a corner or as a safety or just a ball player?
A ball player.
Why do you think that?
I like to be around the ball. I'm trying to do whatever to help my team. So wherever I need it, wherever I hold it, I'm trying to fill it in.
How hard do you think that transition is going from safety to corner in the NFL? What are some of the differences that you have to, pay attention to when you step out there?
I don't think it's just as hard, but when I go back to corner, I mean, technique. Like, you got to depend on your technique to make plays.
Now, Pierre, when he's talking about technique, I'm trying to put it in layman's terms for you guys at home. When you play safety, you typically have all 21 guys in front of you. You can see the entire field, whereas when you play cornerback, it's you and that wide receiver on an island, and you have to learn to look through your wide receiver to the quarterback and whatnot to see multiple things at a time. So that's what Jay Ward is talking about in terms of technique, because safety, sometimes you play flat-footed, you're playing up, you're getting into the box, whereas a corner, you're more dropping back, trying to cover that receiver. So that's kind of what Jay Ward is talking about. Asked Brian Flores about this, defensive coordinator, and he said that transition is always tough, but Jay looks good at practice, but the true test will be in an NFL game when it's live action underway. So we won't know what he looks like until they play their first preseason game, but right now, so far, so good in practice.
And remember, Mekhi Blackman is on IR. Shaq Griffin has been missing for almost a week now with the lower body injury, but Bobby McCain was brought in just a few days ago. Fabian Moreau, news coming down yesterday afternoon that Fabian Moreau is going to be signed by the Vikings. The Vikings made it official this morning. He is out on the practice field today as we speak. That is Fabian Moreau. But, between Bobby McCain and Fabian Moreau, two vets. Bobby McCain played a lot of slot corner, in his time in Miami, so you can move him around the field. He was lining up at safety in practice. But these are two veteran names that have been in the league a while, and I think are names that could help the Vikings.
And I think that's the thing. When you see veterans like Moreau and McCain come in at this time of year, it's because they know how to play football. They know how to play in an NFL game. They know how to take care of themselves when it's outside of football. And I think sometimes when you bring in young rookies or young inexperienced players, they still have to go through trial and error. And at this point in time, the Vikings don't have that time to waste. They need pro guys, pro-ready guys who can step in and make an impact. I'm not saying that McCain and Moreau will come in and certainly be starters,
right,
but they will help push the guys like Byron Murphy, Caleb Evans, Andrew Booth Jr., because they need some production in that defensive back room because there was very little last season.
You mentioned Caleb Evans. Brian Flores not long ago about Caleb Evans saying we're going to need him. And there's no doubt that the Vikings will need a Caleb Evans on his best game coming up this year with Mekhi Blackman missing the entire season. So much more to come here on Vikings Training Camp Live. When we come back, we'll stay on the defensive side of the ball. We've seen a lot of interesting combinations along the defensive line. We'll talk about that on the other side of the break. Welcome back to Vikings Training Camp Live. Pierre Newsham, Ahmad Hicks, wrapping things up here for you. And Ahmad, let's stay on defense. We talked about it in the previous segment with the defensive backs, but then on the defensive line, you and I have been talking for the last couple of days. Interesting combinations across the defensive front. At one point, we saw Patrick Jones lining up at nose tackle, which I thought was interesting because he only weighs 265 pounds.
But he's a freak, man.
He is a freak.
He is versatile. He can do – look, we always say the best way to play in Brian Flores' defense is to be able to play multiple positions. If you limit yourself to just one position, then you limit yourself playing time. That's Shaq Griffin. That's a guy who raved about playing for Brian Flores. He said he's going to allow me to travel, put hands on guys, and to be aggressive. So that's just talking about the cornerback position. But still, Patrick Jones and the rest of this defensive line, Dallas Turner and Jonathan Grenard, I'm sure they're just not going to line up on the outside with their hands in the dirt. There will be moments where they're in the linebacker position, dropping back in coverage or lining up over the middle. I saw at times where Josh Metellus will be lined up over the center last year and drop 35 yards back, right before the snap of the ball. Harrison Smith does it all the time as well. So I think if you're a jack of all trades, you have a spot in Flores' defense.
Yeah, you mentioned being able to be versatile. Josh Metellus really has exemplified that really in a Brian Flores scheme. He has been what a story Josh Metellus really has become ever since he got here in Vikings Training Camp a few years ago to what he is now. Yesterday, when we were watching this group as well, we saw Andrew Van Ginkel, Jonathan Grenard, and Dallas Turner on the field at the same time. Those are three guys. Two, we know that can get after the quarterback. We've seen it in the NFL. We haven't seen Dallas Turner do it in an actual game yet, but we know he comes in highly touted. That could be a scary trio if the three of those guys are on the field at the same time.
Yeah, we're showing video of Bobby McCain, the safety that the team just brought in, but we're talking about the defensive line and linebackers right now. That, like you just said, Grenard, Van Ginkel, Dallas Turner, man, that if I was a quarterback, an opposing quarterback having to face off against just those three guys and then throw in Blake Cashman, the fourth guy, I would be having nightmares the night before. I think Cashman is a guy that may give Ivan Pace Jr. a little run for his money this season as the inside interior linebacker. I know Ivan Pace Jr. has assumed the green dot responsibilities from Jordan Hicks already through this training camp, but it would be really interesting to see what Cashman does or how he's used or if Flores can get all five of those guys on the field at the same time. Well,
competition is certainly good. I know that even though you had one good year, that's the NFL. What have you done for me lately? We hear about it all the time. Even though Ivan Pace was a great story and played very well last year, there's no reason for there not to be competition across all spots at every position. We've talked about it a little bit. In terms of the defensive line, nobody is going to replace a Danielle Hunter. But it doesn't have to be, in terms of production, it doesn't have to be one guy. And that's why you have multiple guys like Van Ginkel and Dallas Turner and Jonathan Grenard. If you can mimic the sack production with three guys as opposed to one, the production is the production.
And one would argue that Jonathan Grenard can replace Danielle Hunter's input and production by himself. He said he wants 20 sacks this season. That's the Neil Hunter type category right there. So, and Justin Jefferson, of course, is going to lead this team. There he is trying to pop up the crowd yesterday before practice. There's Brian Flores talking with Cashman and whatnot, and Asamoah, another defensive back, a linebacker, that could crack the spot on this team. So, like we said, a lot of weapons for this team right now. It's going to be interesting to see where Flores pieces all of them when the season rolls around.
The main weapon that Minnesota has across all fronts is, of course, Justin Jefferson. You saw him a moment ago. Justin Jefferson actually not practicing today, but offensive coordinator Wes Phillips saying it was a pre-planned day off. Nobody needs to have any alarm bells go off. Justin is just fine. He has a pre-planned day off.
And what this means is he's a veteran. He's getting paid big money. He's the leader of this team. He's the captain of this team. He's going to show up each and every Sunday. That means he does not need to be taking all the reps that he used to take in training camp. Give some of those reps to the young guys like Tristan Jackson, Jalen Naylor, Brandon Powell, all those guys vying for a spot.
That's going to do it for us here today on Vikings Training Camp Live. Don't worry, we're going to be back with so much more tomorrow. For Ahmad Hicks, I'm Pierre Newsham. Thank you so much for joining us here on Fox 9.